Hey yo, salute to the people. It's the social forecast. And it's that time again. Today is Thursday, May 2nd, 2019. And I hope you all do something today to further your goals and to help you realize your dreams. All right, let's get into it. So if you're looking at the picture here on the cover, it says the DOJ lays out case for striking down Obamacare in its entirety. Ariane DeVogue, I hope I pronounced that name right, who is a CNN Supreme Court reporter, writes the following. I'm going to quote a little piece of the article here, and then I'm going to get into what my kind of take on it is, and then I'll be curious to know what you all think in the way of comments. So before I get into it, please like, comment, and subscribe. This is what we do on the Social Forecast, day in, day out, all day long. So the Trump administration offered its first full argument for the reversal on the Affordable Care Act, arguing in new court filings that the entire law should not be allowed to remain in effect. The government argues in the filings that the so-called individual mandate requiring Americans to have coverage is unconstitutional, and that the rest of the law should therefore also be struck down, even if the government might support some individual provisions as a policy matter. The landmark legislation provides health care coverage to millions of Americans. And in the filing, Assistant Attorney General Joseph Hunt acknowledged that the administration had previously argued that parts of the law could remain in effect even if the individual mandate were struck down. But he said the administration had come to believe it could no longer defend that position. He suggested that rewriting the statute by picking and choosing which provisions to invalidate would interfere with the role of Congress, and the proper course for the courts would be to strike down the law in its entirety. For those of you who might want to read the full article, I'm sure you can go over to CNN and find that there. Now, here is my first issue with the part of this article that I have read for you all. The argument that the individual mandate to have health insurance, for those of you who aren't sure what that means, sometimes they have a way in these political articles and these different political discussions. Sometimes things can get lost in the verbiage. Basically, the mandate is essentially a requirement. It basically says that if you do not have insurance, then at the end of the year when you file your taxes, if you are unable to prove that you had eligible insurance, you would be penalized on that tax return. Meaning for those people who are expecting refunds, that penalty would decrease the amount of your return. And for those of you who owe money, that penalty could increase the amount that you owe based on the number of members in your family and how long you did or did not have eligible insurance for that fiscal year. Now, here's the thing. This is why I say that the unconstitutional argument doesn't hold much merit for me. For the past 12 years, I've been a resident of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, long prior to there even being an Affordable Care Act, and prior to President Obama even taking office and being elected back in 2008, there was a mandate and a requirement in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts that you had to have insurance. And if you did not have valid insurance or eligible insurance, you would be penalized on your taxes. And the state also had its own version of the Affordable Care Act long before there was an Affordable Care Act, and I believe Mitt Romney played a large part in that, and it may very well be the one of the examples or blueprints for Obama's idea to build on that and put together something for the nation. So in Massachusetts, we have something called Mass Health. So those single parents or those families who are who are below a certain income, who couldn't afford health insurance or through their employers don't have the option to obtain health insurance, would be able to get insurance through the state at no or little cost. That's essentially what we've had for quite a while here now. And the fact that has worked in large part, and the fact that there has been no issues of legality or anything like that, or anybody challenging it on the basis of it being unconstitutional on the state level, that's why I believe, in my opinion, there's no merit there on the federal level to say that it's unconstitutional. I just don't buy it. I think really what's happening is, from the beginning, any administration that was going to follow up Obama's administration was going to try some way, shape, or form to eliminate, change, remix, repackage, redistribute the Affordable Care Act for the purpose, really, in my opinion, of changing it just enough to redistribute credit for it. And that was largely understood by most people and believed to be how things would turn out. And I think at this point, it's past that. And fuck who gets the credit. It's just, why would you, any administration, any politician, why would you want to strip away a program that allowed tens of millions of people who did not have health coverage, or was not offered the option, or did not have adequate healthcare coverage, to have healthcare coverage? What more, other than, in my opinion, education? What more matter of national security is there than for the citizens of the nation to be healthy? And that's a whole nother topic, and I'll probably go on that another time. I'm sure that I have at some point in the past on this platform already. Those of you who've been following the platform for a while, as I talk my shit, these things have come up in my ramblings and my rants over time. So that's one part of it. Now, the second part of it is going to be a lot of my opinion. I'm no politician. I'm no expert. I'm no CNN analyst. However, long-standing, continual, circular conversation that I have had over the years with various people throughout my adult life, I harken back to when I read an article like this. One of the biggest reasons why I feel like the system currently in place in our government does not work. There are many reasons, but one of the biggest reasons I feel is because every administration, and this can go back, and it goes back farther, but I've only been around since the early 80s, so I'm going to go back to as far as I've been actively following and researching as it pertains to my generation. I'm going to go back to Reaganomics. Every single administration, no matter what the law is, no matter what the policy is, no matter what the bill proposal or legislation, no matter what happens during the course of a 4 to 8 year administration, it is, in my opinion, too easy for a new administration to reverse the progress of the prior administration. And while I say the following, there's a double-edged sword, in the sense that the same way that progress from administration to administration is in danger always of being reversed, well, so too are the bad policies that are put into play. So I guess that's the good and the bad, the yin and the yang that comes with a quote-unquote democracy type of system. However, you can't have any definitive change in the government where it's so easy for the one to erase and rewrite the one before, and so on and so on. There are so many checks and balances in our government, which, while they are good because the purpose of them, which is to make sure that no one side or no one branch of the three branches of the government has absolute power, I feel that there are so many checks and balances that at a certain point you get a stalemate. And that stalemate doesn't have to necessarily look like just two people stuck and don't know where to move or have nowhere to move. That can also be that seesaw effect that we often see, where one president spends a term or a term and a half or 2 terms working at whatever their legacy policy or landmark policy is going to be, only to have that next president spend half of their time in the White House trying to change or strike down that policy, or get the people to understand, or at least get Congress to understand from their perspective that there are reasons why that law or policy should not be in effect. So there's so much time fighting back and forth on policies that new administrations don't agree with from prior administrations, that when are these administrations actually spending time governing? When are they actually spending time doing shit that is for the people, by the people, of the people, which is supposed to be what our fucking whole mantra as a country is. It leaves me at a point often when I get into politics where it's like we're never going to see any real true change, because there is no, sometimes there has to be a final and resolute decision maker or process somewhere. And of course, we know in this country that is supposed to be the Supreme Court. A lot of people who do at least understand a little bit about politics understand that past Congress, past the House, past the Senate, the Supreme Court really holds the majority of the power in this country, because everything sort of stops and ends with the Supreme Court. Okay, that's fine. But you have three branches of government that are supposed to work in unison for the benefit of all citizens as a whole. But in actuality, what happens, and we see it if you read this article and many other policy issues that have happened throughout the history of this country, is that those three branches often end up combating each other. And it just becomes a tug of war that no side can win. And sometimes having no side win can be just as bad as having the wrong side win. Because unless you're moving forward, it's regression. There's not progress. It's not progression, regression, and stagnant. Not when it comes to matters that deal with real people in real life in real time. It's either progression or regression, you're moving backwards, or it's still looked at as regression if you're standing still. Because if you're stagnant in a country and in a world that should always be moving forward, this is why now we are behind on things like education. When we look at it on a world scale, technology on a world scale, imports, exports, things that we make right here in America. We're behind on all of these different things, despite what anybody says or what anyone puts out there in the public. And again, I'm no expert. This is just shit that I have observed as a citizen who tries to stay abreast of things that affect not only my generation, but will affect my kids' generation. So here's my final point. And this is a hypothetical. And again, I'm no expert, and I'm interested to know what y'all think. Consider the following, that if the government is able, this current administration is able to strike down Obamacare, right? If they succeed at striking down Obamacare in its entirety, under the argument that it's unconstitutional, what about all the pharmaceutical companies? What about all of the insurance companies? What about all of the corporations who pay their part into the insurance plans and the employees pay their part? What about all these companies come back and file some kind of a class action suit or whatever you want to call it and say, well, listen, if this law is being rescinded now on the basis of it being unconstitutional, then we argue that if it's unconstitutional now, it was unconstitutional at the time that it was implemented, and therefore all of those claims that we paid our part in, all of those claims that we had to accept, even though we would have probably before deemed them to be pre-existing conditions or what have you. Well, if it's unconstitutional, it's being decided that way, then essentially these things never should have happened in the first place. And now we want compensation or restitution for all of the dollars and cents that were paid in on our employees' behalf or on those patients' behalf. Then what? You would have a fucking shitstorm. And please don't think, now again, I'm just a social forecaster. I'm not a CNN analyst. I'm not a, any of those people, right? But don't think for a second that these corporations, that the pharmaceutical companies, that the insurance companies, please don't think for a second that they would not play that card. Who wouldn't play that card? Because you can call it healthcare all you want. The healthcare industry, you can call it that all you want. You can say it's about, patients' health and awareness and ability to, obtain drugs and medications that they need to sustain a longer and healthier and happier life. Great. But those institutions, those corporations, the pharmaceutical company, the insurance companies, they look at and treat healthcare as a business, and to a degree, it is a business. It's a multi-trillion-dollar business. So please don't believe that if these companies and their high-paid attorneys and legal teams did not feel that there was recourse there, please don't think that they would not play that card, because I foresee that happening. If this law is stricken down on the basis of it being unconstitutional, mark my words, I guarantee you will see some kind, I don't know what exactly it would look like, but there would be some form of talk of a lawsuit or some kind of a case that would come out of that, where the argument would be, well then, if it's unconstitutional now, it was unconstitutional then. And you know what? On that basis, on that front, they would have an argument. Curious to know what you all think. I don't pretend to know everything. I just know what I know. It's the Social Forecast. Peace and love.